Bloodborne, a game about traversing the night down the old Victorian-esque estates of Yharnam and slaying unsightly beasts. Though not blood-drunk, you are a hunter and you are sick. The contract you sign to rid the streets of these impurities solidifies your quest and your passage to health. You must partake in the hunt, and the hunt begins tonight. Bloodborne is one of my favourite games of all time, and recently, seemingly out of nowhere, there's been talk about a Bloodborne 2 within the community. Today we're going to look at the possibility of that, looking at various elements and sources and asking ourselves, do we, the community, want another Bloodborne? We'll expand on that a little bit later. Before we delve into it, I want to make this clear if it isn't already. I do not have any secret information, nor do I have a definitive answer. If you came here for that, I apologise, but I don't really know what else to tell you if you were expecting that. The PS4 was released back in November of 2013 and actually did exceptionally well sales-wise, and was a completely different situation if you were to compare it to the PS3's original launch. It was rumoured that with every single PS3 that was sold, Sony was actually losing money, but as technology advances and became more readily available, the price of the components became more reasonable. Anyway, with that said, the launch titles of the PlayStation 4 were a little lackluster and mainly focused on previous gen games being brought into the newer gen. Games like Battlefield 4 and Call of Duty Ghosts and Warframe were among those launch titles, and people were a tad bit disappointed, well, to put it lightly. For us Souls players, we didn't have a Souls game on the PlayStation 4 until March of 2015, and that was Bloodborne. Developed by From Software and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment, Bloodborne hit the shelves and was met with a critical success. And just like our Dark Souls 4 video, here comes the money part. Now, when developing and releasing a new IP, it's always a risk. It's proven that not only in movies and television, but gaming as well, a series will sell more than a new IP. That's just a fact. So, Sony's expectations were low for Bloodborne. What they didn't expect was an 87% sell-through rate. Now, my business terminology is limited, but what this means is that if you were to look at every single physical copy of Bloodborne that got shipped to retailers, 87% of that number was sold to consumers, which is massive for a new IP. I must add though, that number is for the Japanese market and not the rest of the world. The rest of the world, however, were still gaining huge numbers. Now, finding accurate sales figures is hard for a console game. I've searched high and low and I don't think Sony releases them. But we do know that on the week of release, it was number 1 in Japan, number 2 in the UK, just behind Battlefield Hardline, and in North America it was also ranked number 2 in overall sales. By April, the game had sold over 1 million copies. This most likely helped the release of Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin as well, which was released on the PlayStation 4 on April the 7th of that year. But what I want to put emphasis on is the fact that this was a new IP. Sure, it's still in the same realm as Dark Souls, it's its own entity. Not only that, it's a console exclusive, and the numbers were staggering to say that it had these factors playing against it. Now, the next part is personal but still interesting nonetheless. Bloodborne was a console seller for me. As primarily a PC gamer, I dropped £350 on a console just for this game. Now, like I said, this is a personal thing and I can't find any numbers that correlate to how many consoles Bloodborne sold because, well, I very much doubt that'd be something a retailer would track. So, I'm curious. If you were in the same boat as me, I'd really like to hear that. Were you someone who bought a PlayStation 4 just for Bloodborne? Let me know. So looking at our question, will there ever be a Bloodborne 2, I think the sales figures points to a yes. It exceeded Sony's expectations and despite it being a new IP did really well sales wise. And we know franchises do better in sales, so you can only go up from here. Now moving on, there's been this stigma around Miyazaki that he hates sequels. In 2013, Miyazaki sat down with Edge and discussed at the time the upcoming game Dark Souls 2. Bear in mind, whilst Dark Souls 2 was in development, the Bloodborne project was well underway with the codename Project Beast, but that isn't really irrelevant. In that interview he stated, "I wouldn't really care for a Dark Souls 8 to come out, that's not the point. It's more, what do the fans want? We want to stay true to what they expect. To add on to that, in an interview with Kotaku a few months back, and yes, I know these interviews span a large time frame, but he also mentioned, "I have no intention of ending in a way where I couldn't create a game that surpasses the Souls series. That would be sad, wouldn't it?" This was when he was asked if he'd make games wildly different from the Dark Souls games. Now to me, Bloodborne is that game, the game that has surpassed Dark Souls. It still has that core element of the Souls games at the foundation, but the layers in which Bloodborne is built is full of incredible aesthetics such as beautiful architecture of Yharnam, the look and design of the hunters, the amazing trick weapons. With that said, this was Miyazaki at the helm of directing, and even though he did mention those in the past interviews, he was quoted saying, rather than make another sequel, in which he was referring to the current From Software games, it's time we take a step to a new direction. Now, it appears his mindset has gone from making sure his audience is happy to having this mindset where he wants to just make great games, as he knows they've built this dedicated audience by having these high quality products. From Software were dipping their toes into the river just to see how much they could get away with after they've stayed with the same franchise, Dark Souls, for 4 years. Bloodborne was an accidental masterpiece, both commercially and critically, just like Demon Souls. But that's not to say the game was perfect. Even Miyazaki himself said so. The reason he went back to the Souls franchise for Dark Souls 3 was because after working on Bloodborne for 2 years, he said that the limitations in Bloodborne made him want to return to the Souls franchise, and was quoted saying, "Because of the characters of Bloodborne's gameplay, its battle style, as well as role-playing elements, it's limited compared to the Dark Souls franchise. It doesn't necessarily mean Bloodborne was bad, however, while working on it, I realised I want to create something which has a wide range of battle styles, or features magic, or those things which allow the player to wear awesome armour. Those elements are what actually made me come back to the Souls franchise." This can be interpreted in 2 ways. Like I mentioned, Bloodborne was an accidental success that exceeded everyone's expectations. Miyazaki can do one of 2 things, I feel. 1. Go back to the Bloodborne franchise with more support from Sony Interactive Entertainment, as now they will be more inclined to offer their help due to the monetary success we talked about earlier. Then they can work on addressing the issues that Miyazaki himself had with the game. Or, secondly, which I feel is more likely going to be the case, use what they learned from developing Bloodborne, what went right, what went wrong, and use this information for the next Souls-like game they create, which honestly excites me. Like I mentioned, I love Bloodborne so much, and they showed us firsthand that they can bring us into an entirely new setting with new gameplay mechanics such as firearms and quickstep, yet still have that core Souls gameplay that we've all become so familiar with. But to answer the question, do I think there's going to be a Bloodborne 2? Honestly, I doubt it. The only real argument for development of a sequel is that the original IP has a lot of commercial success surrounding it, but with that said, games have been made with the only intent to make money. Dark Souls 3 I think comes under this category, honestly. Sure, it's a great game, but I'd be strongly surprised if Bandai Namco didn't give From Software a gentle nudge and urge them to create it. And if you don't think money is a big incentive to create games, then you're delusional. I feel Miyazaki didn't like this, judging by what he's talked about in interviews and what his vision for the company is. If you asked me if I personally wanted a Bloodborne 2, well, selfishly, I'd say no. Anything that might tarnish the original experience I had with the series, I don't want to touch that with the 10-foot barge pole. But with that said, if it's a thing, you bet your ass I'm going to play it. Just as a small tangent, if Bloodborne 2 were a thing, I wouldn't be surprised if Sony capitalized on it. Sony currently needs as much incentive for people to purchase their new system, the PS4 Pro, as possible. And they know Bloodborne was a console seller back in 2015. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if, for example, a higher frame rate would be used as a selling point. I actually think The Last of Us Part 2 will be 60 FPS on the PS4 Pro. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if, like I said, Bloodborne 2 was a thing, it would perform at a higher frame rate than its predecessor on the Pro system. They know the power these games have over the die-hard fans, and honestly, if Bloodborne 1 had a 60 FPS patch on the PS4 Pro, I might consider getting one. And this is for a game I've sank hundreds of hours into. But with all that said, ladies and gentlemen, is there going to be a Bloodborne 2? With the way things are looking right now, with From Software's 3 planned upcoming titles. And even though it was a console seller for a lot of people and was a huge commercial success, I really don't think there's going to be a Bloodborne 2. So guys, fellow hunters out there, I'll leave you with this.
Farewell, good hunter. May you find your worth in the waking world.
Take care everyone, be good to one another, and thanks for watching.